Oh, hey. Hey, your worst fears have been realized. I told you I was going to shoot another video to finish up this whole thing. But guess what? I think I just added to this one because this is only going to take another 5 minutes or so. We're going to finish off this hand mirror. Well, I hope my wife doesn't think that this is a frying pan. We're going to finish this up. And again, I took care of all the hard stuff before you guys came back. If you remember the last time, I had 3 screws in here and I was showing you how to suspend the board, the hand mirror, after I put a finish on it. Well, you know what I did? I took about 45 minutes or so to sand this thing like nobody's business. I sanded it with 80, 120, 220 on the edges, on the surfaces, to try to make sure that this is exactly touchable so that when I give it to somebody, it looks like a finished piece. Now I'm ready to put a finish on it. So maybe you guys can help me with it. What do you think of my palatial estate here, huh? Pretty impressive. This is where the old man lives. That's right. It's no Dunellen High School classroom, but it's a pretty good substitute. What I did was I just finished sanding this with 600 grit. So that's my finished sanding. I started, of course, with 80, 120, 220, 400, and now I'm done with 600. The other thing that I want to do before I put a finish on this is to make sure I get all the dust off of this. So what I want to do is I want to clean it up, because if there's dust on here, that dust is going to stay and it'll definitely affect the finish. So I think I'm going to take it back to the point that I left it at in the shop, where I put my 3 screws in here so that I'm able to put a finish on the entire project and suspend it. Remember, I just drilled about an 1/8 inch deep pilot hole in here? I took those 2-inch screws, I put a little screw here and a little screw here and a little screw here, so that I'm able to hold it. When I was sanding this, these screws were in here, and obviously it was a royal pain to try to sand around these screws, so I took them off, make it a little bit easier for me to put my sanding on here and not get in the way. I'm all set to polyurethane. Take a look at the size of this. I mean, when you look at it, you know, most of this is mirror. This is all mirror over here. There's not a whole lot of polyurethane on this. So some people will take out a 2-inch brush. If I do that, to me, I'm just wasting polyurethane. So I asked in the house if somebody had a smaller brush, and my wife did, but she has no idea what I need it for. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to polyurethane this whole thing, one shot, let it suspend, let it dry. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop, put about 3 more coats on. I'll put about 3 or 4 coats on. Then I'll wax it. And then the very last thing that you're going to come back and join me with is when I put this mirror in and I present it as no, not a Christmas gift, as the birthday gift to the young lady that I married years ago, who still has me heart. Here we go. Little polyacrylic, water-based polyurethane. So what I'm going to do is just the tips of the bristles, I touch it in. And now what I'm going to do is just polyurethane on the top. What I'm going to notice, or what I want you guys to notice, is that, hey, here's my dog. Hey, that's really what I want you to notice. That's the important stuff. Notice how this changes color. And what will also happen with age is that this is going to darken. And of course, that mirror, which stays as a nice clear piece of silvered glass, is going to look like such a sharp contrast when I finish and it darkens with age. So I always do the ends first. Notice how I'm holding it. I'm holding it by the handle. I don't need to hold on to the screws yet. So I'm going to do the ends first, and I did this surface up to the handle. I'll do the back side. I always go along the grain. Remember, I always tell you guys, the one thing that you never ever want to do, sand against the surface grain or polyurethane against the grain, because those streaks will be in there forever. You'll never ever get them out. So if I look at that, and all I'm concerned about is just covering. That first coat should just be coverage. So I'm going to cover with the handle. A little too much polyurethane on there, but I'm going to blend it out. Of course, I don't want drips. And now when I'm doing the handle, What's the purpose of the 3 screws? The 3 screws are so that I could hold on to the screws and polyurethane the handle. The other part that's difficult is if you don't put these screws in there and you try to polyurethane it, you do one side, you do the other side, and invariably you're going to get drips on the side that has not been polyurethane. In other words, if I do this side first, let it dry, I'm going to put too much on. This has been bull-nosed. What will happen is you're going to get drips on the underside, and it always happens. Whatever happens to be the last side is going to be the decent side. The side prior to that is going to have drips on it. So right now, yep, I guess I didn't see that because it was right under my nose. Chortle, chortle. We'll do the handle, finish off the handle. And the other thing that you noticed is that that was easy to point out because there was a color difference. So this now has taken a different hue than it did before I polyurethane. It definitely is darker. Take a look at the spots that I really liked on this. Remember I said this grain looked pretty cool on this back side. I'm really happy with that. If I flip this over to this side, what really looks neat is that, and I certainly did not plan this, God takes care of that sort of stuff. But when I sanded this up, look at how there's a nice round circle. There's concentric circles right at the handle. How cool does that look? Almost looks like the Milky Way or the solar system. All right, so let me wipe off the excess polyurethane in here. And now what I want to do is I want to suspend it. So I'm going to take a piece of masking tape, and it's actually pretty easy. The thing that I always think is really funny is when I tell people, take the masking tape, wrap it around a screw and suspend it. What they do is go around all 3 screws. And then I'm like, what's the purpose of that? It's like they're playing that old little kids game, Cats in the Cradle. So I'm just going to take that tape. I put it on 1 screw right here. And watch yourself because there's a dog right in back of you. Oh boy, that would be a better gift. And now what I'm going to do is just let this thing hang from a table. I want to get the dust off of this because I don't want it to fall. It's a beautiful day out here in the neighborhood. So I'm going to guess that that'll probably take maybe 10 minutes, if that, to dry. And then what I'm going to do is, in between each coat, I'll get a piece of 400 grit, scuff sand it, wipe off the dust, put another coat on. I could do it either with 400 grit or 600 grit, depending on how rough it feels. But 3 coats should be fine with that. I'm probably going to put 4 or 5 because I want this to be special. After I do that, just like we normally do, I'm going to take some steel wool, I'll take some wax, I'll wax it up. So the next time I see you, that will all be done. I'll have all my coats on, everything will be polyurethane, everything will be waxed, and I just want to show you how you set the mirror in. So take a break, and I'll see you back here in about 14, maybe 6 seconds. I'll be back with the finished product. Hey, did you ever screw up? I mean, like really screw up? And I'm not talking about, talking about the disc sander and you're calling it the spindle sander like I did for 3 times in the last episode. No, I mean screw up. I mean like you film an entire lesson on routing and then all of a sudden, when you're ready to film another lesson, a different day, you take what you have and you erase it all. Well, that's what I did. And I know this technology is new and I'm thrilled that I got as many lessons correctly loaded and quizzed out. But this one I screwed up with. The last lesson, or what you're supposed to see right now, is the lesson of me taking the mirror and setting it up on the workstation, clamping it down and using a handheld router and routing that center section out. Well, that's what's missing. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to simulate what went on with the actual finished product. Now, it's not completely finished. We're going to finish it in a little bit. But here's where we were, and you could follow me along. Oh, by the way, yes, this is a different classroom. This is a palatial estate. Yes, indeed. if I take a look at where we were, remember this section was completely filled in except the circle cutter had left that edge in there. What I did was I set up my little yellow DeWalt handheld router with a 1/4 inch bit. And what I did was I clamped this board down to the workstation and I routed this section out. The important thing that I kind of want to show you is what I'm going to show you right now, and that is how I clamp this up, because I think that really matters. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to use, I don't have a work table here. How about my railing to my deck? Come on, let's see if we can't make this work. Use your imagination and imagine that this wood is all in here, and except there's that line where I left you with right before I said I was going to sand it. Well, I sanded it. Then what I did was I took it over to the workstation, and that router is about 3.5 inches wide, which means that I only want to route from the top of the mirror and come back so that the router is supported by the handle. I can set it up this way and use the router and start routing out here and move this way. But when I get to the end, I have 3.5 inches. It's not being supported by anything. So the first thing you want to do is actually clamp it up the right way. And that is, if I work on it like this, I want to put a clamp over here at my handle and work off of that top side of the mirror towards me and towards the handle. The important thing to realize is we have a choice here. Remember, we could use a C-clamp or a deep throw clamp, or we can use a Jorgensen parallel hand screw clamp. And I think I used this Jorgensen parallel hand screw clamp when I was using the drill press. What I did was I clamped the handle down to the table of the drill press, and I used this because it was a bigger area. Where if I just use this C-clamp or a deep throw clamp, it's only being held in one spot, which allows that mirror to be able to pivot. So I don't really want to use this deep throw clamp. What I really want to use is my Jorgensen parallel hand screw clamp, which means that these jaws have to be parallel always for maximum strength. They also have to clear, in this case, my deck railing and my handle. So when I put this together and I clamp this up, what I wanted to do is to be parallel so that when I tighten it up, I'm being held across this entire area here. Now, if I look at this, it looks like the back area is a little bit bigger than the front area, so I'm going to close this section off, tighten the front, and now that looks like it's a lot. What a classroom, huh? You got the dogs barking. Let's fire up the motorcycle. Let's get that Harley going, right? You can't beat this. Well, you know what I can do? I can use that motorcycle as my router motor. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the router on and pretend that this is the bit. And I'll show you how I start and how I work on this. Now, what I want to do here is I really want the Harley to get going so I can get a little bit more power with my router bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm always going to start the router bit off of the wood and then drop it down onto the wood. And whenever I stop it, I always want to bring the router back and then shut it off. I never want the router to start or stop with it making contact with the wood, because a lot of times what will happen is as it slows down, it'll take the router and actually kick it out. So what I want to do is I'll start the router up first. I'll drop it down in the center of that hand mirror. I'm going to move out to the side, and I'm just going to go from left to right to take it out, almost like I'm working on a root canal, like I'm a dentist and I'm taking that section out. After I do that, then what's going to happen is I'll take a little bit of 80 grit abrasive paper. I'll sand that mirror, that section where the mirror is going to drop down. After I do that, so here's now the router, the motorcycle, and the dog together. You can't beat this. I'll drop the router down. I'll go from side to side. After I do that, it usually leaves a rough area on this surface. So what I'll do is I'll take a piece of 80 grit, just go over this a little bit so it lays nice and flat. I actually did that already. I'm just going to shut my router off. And actually, I'm losing power because my router just completely shut off. Let me actually show you how I did this. I turned the router on, and then I moved it out. And then I went from left to right.
Don't hit the edges.
That's the important thing, was I don't drop it on the edge or come close to it. Just like the motorcycle, I'll shut it off. That's tough, making a router sound for that long. After I did that, I brought the whole project out of the shop. And as I said to you before, 80 grit, 120 grit, 220 grit, 400 grit, 600 grit, 4 coats of polyurethane, scuff sanded, polyurethane, scuff sanded, polyurethane, scuff sanded, polyurethane, scuff sanded. It felt really good. I really liked the grain. Felt absolutely super smooth. I took some steel wool and waxed it like crazy. And now I'm at the point where I'm ready to put the mirror in. To do this, what I want to do, like I said, make sure this area is flat and clean, which it is. I took those screws out, and sometimes those screws will actually back out some material over here. And if you do that, just sand that a little bit. And of course, nobody's going to see this. But now what I want to do is I want to attach the mirror that I have. The mirror that I had, and I said to you before when I started this whole project, was custom cut before I ever started my mirror. So my circle cutter that I used to cut this open space around here was set so it just fits in here. Like when I put this rascal in here, there is probably about a 32nd of an inch play around that entire area, that diameter. So that's what I'm going to get when I put my material, my glass in. But here's an important thing. So many times I hear people say, I'll just take some silicone and I'll put some silicone caulk in here, or I'll take some adhesive caulk and I'll put it in there. Some people I've even heard say, well, I'll just glue it in. That mirror has something on the back of it. This is just a piece of glass. It's a clear piece of glass, but on the back side of every mirror is sprayed silver. So that sprayed silver on the back of that will break down if you use a certain type of material. If we use silicone, that will actually eat away at the silver. So if I adhere that into there, there's going to be a gap in there eventually because that silver is going to disappear. So what I want to use is this stuff that's called Mirror Mastic. And Mirror Mastic is an adhesive that's made specifically for anything that has silvering on the back of it. Of course, true to the form of this video where I say we do this in one take, I had some Mirror Mastic that had solidified in the nozzle. So when I tried to take it off, the entire nozzle came out, okay? I'm trying to simulate the shot because now you can hear a saw going from the other neighbor. Now he shuts it off. Excellent, perfectly timed. Here's my Mirror Mastic. I'm gonna put it in my caulking gun, of course, and the dog starts and pretty soon the motor will start again. I don't have a nozzle here, so what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna take my Mirror Mastic, lay it in there, and I'm gonna lay a little rounded bead on here. I don't wanna put a whole lot, but what I try to do is go around that area. And what I'm gonna do is just spread that out with my finger. And you could see it's kind of rubbery. I'm going to take my finger, just kind of spread it out in this area. We don't want it to take up a whole lot of space, so I do want to go around this entire area. And you could see I probably put on a whole lot too much because that's globbed on. I don't want to do that. So what I'm going to do, of course, is see if I can't get some of this off. And if you're working with a nozzle, usually it's a lot easier to control. Oh boy. Last step is to attach my mirror. And of course I'll get the mirror mastic on my finger on my mirror. I don't want to do that. You just know that's going to happen. So what I'll do is I'll take my mirror. I'm going to place it on the top of that opening, drop it down. What I want to do is push this down. So I'm going to push it down. And then what I do is I turn this just to make sure that I'm hearing that mastic to all the areas. I should put my glasses on to see that that gap around there is pretty consistent. And it looks pretty consistent. So right there, that's not bad. Now I do want to show you another thing that's important. On my mirror, I have my mastic here. That mastic is going to take about a day or so to dry, so I don't want to clean that off because I could move the mirror a little bit. What I do want to do is use some Windex to clean that off. But the problem that you're going to run into is if I take a bottle of Windex and I spray it on this mirror, you're going to get overspray. You're going to get overspray on this handle. And you don't want this handle to get any kind of ammonia on it. So what we always want to do is make sure that you put the Windex on the cloth, put it on here, rub it in, as opposed to spraying it where it goes all over the place. So let's take a look at this. And I definitely don't want to drop this. So I'm going to leave it like this. But I think that really came out nice. I'm really happy with that. The back grain looks pretty sharp, and the mirror that's on there. And like I said, I'll just put a little Windex on a cloth and I'll wipe that off to make sure that that area comes off, okay? Any questions? I have a question for you. What's the best material to attach a piece of glass, a piece of granite, or a piece of mirror onto another substance? That, of course, is going to be mirror mastic, M-A-S-T-I-C. Mirror mastic is what you want to use. So this takes care of all my projects right now. We finished up a short table. We worked on a wine holder. We did a jewelry box. We made a garden bench. This will take care of this year, wrapping it up. I wish you guys a great summer. I know it's been a difficult year. You guys hang in there. Woodworking will always make sure you're grounded, because it makes you appreciate your hands, your heart, and also your mind. Have a great one, and I'll be in touch.